Can I help you, young miss? No, please don't chew on that. Hey little hoes, my name is Kristen and welcome back to my channel. So today is another hashtag video. This was created by the lovely Sydney over at Peaceful Planting. Hi sweetie. She created this tag to try and spread a little bit of positivity and, you know, bring some fun into everyone's day because it has not been a fun time around the globe. Her idea was to create this tag, Oddball Plants, hi, to feature everyone's weirdest, wackiest plants. I figured I would join in the fun and show off some of my favorite oddball plants. And I have to say, I absolutely love this tag, Sydney, because I am all about weird and wacky plants, be it outdoors, indoors, whatever. There are so many odd things on my wish list, and even downright ugly, but I don't care. I like the weird and unusual, uncommon things. The ones that only a mother could love, you know? So I'm gonna try and do this with a kitty in my arms. I'm gonna pick a few different plants from my houseplant collection that I think are kind of weird and wacky and cool in some way. I am doing this from a different angle now because we all know the rules. You can't disturb a sleeping cat or a resting cat. My first So one of my first plants that I consider an oddball would probably be my Bowia volubilis. And that one is also called a sea onion. It is a caudex plant, and being a caudex plant, it has that giant swollen base. And with the Bowia, tends to go through phases of putting out an extreme amount of vegetative growth, and then it will go somewhat dormant and drop all the leaves. But I found, at least in my sunroom, it's super happy and will pretty much immediately put on new growth after it drops some of its foliage. It climbs like you wouldn't believe. It will literally entangle and entwine all my other plants. I wouldn't call it invasive or anything like that, or worry about it choking out any other plants. It seems relatively well behaved. It just wants to get a leg up, potentially just climbing for more sunlight. But it's entwined into most of my things. You can tell that it requires much more water when it is actively growing. You'll especially notice it needs water when the bulb starts to look shriveled and shrunken. I would always imagine at that point for normal plants that it's getting too much water, especially with, you know, a caudex plant, but in reality, that's a sign that it needs more water. So once it starts to get more sunken, shriveled looking, give it more water and it should plump back up. Another weirdo plant has got to be one that you guys, I'm sure, are tired of hearing about all the time. Ceropagia sandersonii, and that guy is in bloom yet again, and I forget just how cool it is until it blooms, which is fairly often. It'll put out probably 3 or 4 blooms at a time. I am trying to fertilize somewhat regularly with more bloom to help stimulate all those flowers. Hi. Hi, honey. I did let it dry out a little too much, and like the Bowia, they are generally very dry tolerant plants, but you will notice, especially when they are root bound, when they're in full sun, they will need a little bit more moisture to keep going. Number 3 has got to be my new baby, my Epipremnum Shangri-La. And you guys will probably remember this from I just had chips. I'm not dying. It's not COVID, I promise. I just unboxed this recently. It's a new guy for me, and so far it's doing really well. I potted it up in one of Boyfriend's new pots that he makes. The Shangri-La is a contorted pothos, and what's very interesting about it is how the backs of the leaves are very, what do I want to say? They have a lot of weird ridges and puckering. I tend to categorize anything that's crested or contorted as being some of the weirdest plants, and obviously some of my favorites. What do you think? You like it? So this is the Epipremnum, and I'm not sure, I think this is a pretty good sunbeam for showing it off. But you can see those weird ridges in there. And I'm kind of in love with it. I was hoping to find Epipremnum skeleton key, but I did stumble across that in the process of trying to find skeleton key. I'm very happy with my purchase, but skeleton key's next on my list. And probably my number 1 oddball plant that I own currently for indoor plants has got to be the Amorphophallus konjac. Yes, konjac. This is, if you guys have seen those big corpse lilies, the Amorphophallus titanicum. A lot of them will be at botanical gardens and such. This is a relative of it. Ouch! Got sharp claws. Be a relative of it. It doesn't have quite as big of flowers, and by quite as big, I mean they're not nearly as big. Goodbye. Back to regular position. She has now left the building. The Amorphophallus konjac, I'll show some pictures here. I got my bulbs, or I guess you'd call them corms, actually. I got mine from work. We had a few specimen plants in the greenhouse, and they put off a number of new side shoots, which we propagated and sold. Mine was pretty much just foliage last year. It grew some, but was stunted because I didn't put it in a big enough pot. So I will be, Freddie, do not eat the ficus. I will be repotting it to something even bigger sometime this year. I have a few pots of it, but I've only noticed one that is starting to sprout. The others are still in dormancy. It's pretty typical for the plant to have a dormant period. It's usually over the winter months, and once it starts to warm up, it starts to pop out of it. Typically, I don't believe they bloom until the mother corm is substantial enough, and that can take a number of years. Another oddball plant that I don't think people realize just how weird it is until you grow it or see it or just stop to think about it, but the Pinwort, or butterwort. It's a carnivorous plant, and the leaves are sticky. They don't look like it until you touch it, but they are quite slimy once you rub them. And when little gnats or fruit flies or bugs happen to crawl on there, they get stuck, And then the digestive juices kick in and start to dissolve it. This guy is super easy. I've been growing it for years. My friend Erin gave me this start. It forms little rosette clumps. It is very shallow rooted, so this pot is barely full of roots. Honestly, it's probably in the first 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. And it does need to be refreshed, the soil, every now and again. It does like its moisture. I tend to fill that little bottom tray up with water, let it soak it up, but let it dry out between the waterings just to try and promote more deep rooting. It gets really pretty flowers on it. This particular species has some light lilac ones. And it does wonders if you have fruit flies or gnats. In our greenhouse at work, we have a terrarium with these, and they catch the white flies very nicely. So that will be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed, and again, a huge thanks to the beautiful Sydney for creating this tag, and totally unrelated to planties, but girl, I wish you lived closer to give me some makeup advice because your makeup is on point. Anyway, thank you guys, and I will talk to y'all later. Goodbye.